Are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. Penna Dexter.
Thank you very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, for Point of View. I am Penna Dexter, and in studio with me is Jeremy Dyes from First Liberty Institute. And Jeremy, there's been some breaking news. I'm glad you're here to cover this with me, and we've got a guest we're going to bring in just a moment. But the Trump administration, this has actually been long awaited, something we've talked about for years, really, on Point of View. But most recently, last spring, we were hoping the Trump administration would really protect the religious liberty of Americans and exempt believers and companies run by Christians and nonprofit organizations like the Little Sisters of the Poor and Your Client Insight for Living and others from the contraception mandate. Well, there has actually been some action on that today. Tell us about it.
Yeah, no, we've been expecting for several months now that the administration would take some action. They promised back in, what was it, May or April, I can't recall now, that the executive order that President Trump signed, and at that time there was some reason to believe that there was going to be relief from this contraceptive mandate that we've been fighting for, oh my goodness, what now, 4 years I think it's been, that we've been in active litigation on this matter across the country. And our clients in specific are, like you mentioned, Insight for Living, which is Chuck Swindoll's ministry here out of near Dallas. We've got other ministries spread across the country, retirement communities, Christian colleges, other ministries that have been seeking an exemption from the coercive power of government to tell them that they must include things that go against their religious beliefs as part of their health plan. And so today the administration announced a new, what's called an interim final rule, which will just take its place until it becomes a final rule. But that it is a very broad protection. It is providing that exemption that that our clients have been seeking in litigation for multiple years. It kind of follows on the heels of the case that people remember, Hobby Lobby, and as you said, the Little Sisters of the Poor, sort of in that same vein. But it is, I would say, a very nice fulfillment of a promise that President Trump has made. Maybe would like to have seen it a little sooner, but I'll take it whenever we can get it. And we're very glad that the president has provided this relief for our clients, and look forward to fully resolving these cases as soon as we possibly can.
Well, in reading about it, it seemed like it was even stronger than expected, because it talks about organizations' religious beliefs, and sort of qualifying them for the exemption, but also moral convictions.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, if it's based upon your sincerely held religious beliefs, that's one thing, and I think we can understand that. But if some people don't have a sincerely held religious belief about it, but have a moral opposition to something, that allows that conviction to go forward as well. So it provides a real broad protection, and not just to religious ministries. It's to for-profit companies as well, and to a variety of other contexts in which we'll find that people will now be freed up. And I think most importantly, and perhaps fundamentally, if they want to include these contraceptives or these abortifacients as a part of their plan, I suppose they're permitted to do so. But now they're exempt from being forced by their government to do it. And so now it puts it in the position of making that decision between these individuals, organizations, companies, between them and their God rather than them and the government itself.
Which is a very good development. And with us to discuss this, and also there's another piece of news this week, and that was that the House of Representatives actually passed a ban of abortion after 20 weeks, these dismemberment abortions that are so awful. And, of course, this heads to the Senate now. With us to discuss that is our guest. I know she'll want to weigh in on the contraceptive mandate. Also, her name is Catherine Glenn Foster, and she's president and CEO of Americans United for Life, fairly new in that position. Of course, AUL is not new. It's been around for a long time, and it's a national pro-life organization and also has a pro-life legal team there. And Catherine Glenn Foster, as I said, is its president. Catherine, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I know that you and Jeremy have worked together on some legal work in the past, so he was really glad that you were going to be joining us today.
So good to have you.
Likewise, I was really delighted to hear your name.
Yeah, well, it's good to have a good friend back on the show with us.
Catherine, I'm going to start with the breaking news about the announcement about sort of the exemption for conscience and also for religious belief from the HHS contraceptive mandate. What's your take?
Well, Americans United for Life is so encouraged by this news. It's been a long time coming, as Jeremy said, and speaking specifically as the president and CEO of a non-religious organization, we are delighted that now we will be free to choose insurance that follows our conscience, and we're not dictated to by a government inserting itself into the market and telling us what coverage we must offer to our employees who agree with us to be working here.
Well, yeah, and, I guess I always considered you a Christian organization because you work in the life issue, but there are many organizations out there who just work to protect the sanctity of human life just from a moral framework, and that's why I was so glad to see that this action by the White House and the HHS included moral convictions, too.
Exactly. And I personally absolutely am a believer, and I know that most of the people with us are, but there are so many people who aren't, and they should be free to follow their moral beliefs, just as someone who is basing those beliefs on a belief in God is able to.
Yeah. And, I look at contraception, and, of course, the Catholic Church, for instance, talks about, has its own position on contraception, but some contraception, and especially the emergency type contraception, actually does cause or can cause an abortion, can't it?
Absolutely, and that has been proven by science. That's one of the ways that these abortifacient so-called contraceptives work. And so it really is a life issue.
Okay. Jeremy and I also want to talk to you about what the House did this week. And that is a great, they've done it before, of course, but they've passed this ban on late-term abortions, and it broke down 237 to 189. The House did its job. This is certainly a popular bill because the fetus can feel pain at 20 weeks, well before that, actually. I think it's good to say it's a 5-month abortion ban, because when you think about a 5-month fetus baby, that is, well developed, isn't it?
Absolutely. I'm speaking here as a mom, and I know that I have always tracked week by week, month by month, the development of my own children in the womb. And of course, we look at the ultrasounds and share them with the older siblings and pass those around in the family. And so we know, right, science has shown us that these are living human beings. And obviously we believe that they are worthy of every protection. And so, again, we were just so encouraged by the House of Representatives on Tuesday passing this Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. And then I was actually able to be with Senator Lindsey Graham, Senator Langford, Senator Ernst, as this bill was introduced at the news conference introducing this bill in the Senate. We know that children at 5 months and older feel pain. We know also of the exponentially increased risk to the mother. We know that research has shown that a woman seeking an abortion at 20 weeks, 5 months, is 35 times more likely to die from that abortion than she was in the first trimester.
Can we hold you over for a minute?
Sure.
All right. We will be right back with Catherine Glenn Foster from Americans United for Life.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
For decades, sociologists have documented the phenomenon of extended adolescence. This is where someone who is an adult still acts like a teenager. One classic example would be a 35-year-old who has part of their rent and bills covered by parents and continues to take college classes. Jean Twenge, in her latest research on the trailing edge millennials, who she calls iGen, are extending this phenomenon even further. She documents that teenagers are becoming adults even later than the last generation. She argues that teens today are less prepared for adulthood. She also adds that they are safer since the rates of car accidents and teen pregnancies have fallen dramatically. Fewer 12th graders have tried alcohol. Back in 1994, 85% had tried alcohol. Today, only 66% have tried alcohol. Only 73% of 12th graders have driver's license, down from 85% 20 years ago. One of the most dramatic differences can be found in social dating. Only about half of them have been on a date. Compare that to 83% of 12th graders who had been on a date back in 1994 by their senior year. Another dramatic difference is one that we've talked about in the past, work experience. About half of 12th graders have worked for pay, which is down from 72% in 1994. Many more are taking college prep classes or hanging out at home. Now, all of these dramatic changes have resulted in a relatively new term being used by sociologists, emerging adulthood. This is their attempt to describe a new life stage between adolescence and adulthood. All of this reminds me of the jingle, "I don't want to grow up, I'm a Toys R Us kid." Maybe it's time for adults to say to the kids, it's time to grow up. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I am Penna Dexter. Our guest is Catherine Glenn Foster, the president of Americans United for Life, and Jeremy Dyes is here in studio with me. Jeremy?
Hey, Catherine, thanks for talking about this 20-week ban that's now successfully passed the House. It passed by a vote of 237 to 189. I think we've got a good majority there in the House. Things get a little tighter for you as you go over to the Senate. What's the prognostication over there?
That's true. You know, we do have a tighter vote there, and it will be more difficult than in the House to pass. But with that said, we know that there are a couple of senators who may be tough sells. We also know that there are Democrats who see the truth in this, who see that this is a humanitarian, a common sense bill that 8 in 10 Americans agree with. 8 in 10 Americans believe that there need to be significant restrictions on abortion after the first trimester. And so in the past, you know, this is the third time that this bill has been introduced in the last 5 years. And we've seen Democrats cross the aisle and vote pro-life. So that's very encouraging. That's a very positive sign. And we know also that it took years to pass the Partial Birth Abortion Act, which was finally enacted in 2003. That was a years-long effort. It wasn't something that was accomplished overnight. So just as this bill has been introduced 3 times in the last 5 years, we know that it may take some time. But I also believe that we are on the right side of history with this, to coin a phrase, and that the arc of history is in our favor, that we will end up protecting life in this way with this, again, humanitarian common sense bill sooner or later. And we certainly hope that we will get enough Republicans voting yes, enough Democrats seeing the truth, crossing the aisle this time to make a difference, to save those thousands of lives every year, to help those thousands of mothers every year that this will impact.
And I see also that we've had similar legislation appointed in, what is it now, 16 different states, I think. What impact, and I suppose I know the answer to that, but this is going to then extend to the entire country if it's not just those 16 states.
Exactly. You know, there's only 7 states and Washington, D.C. with no restrictions on late-term abortion. So, again, we're talking about something where the country is headed in the right direction. Right now, there are only 7 countries that allow elective abortion past 5 months, and only 4 that allow it throughout all 9 months of pregnancy. We're one of those 4 in company with countries like China, countries like North Korea, not exactly known for their human rights records. So the states are moving in the right direction, are saving lives. And even if only 1% of abortions every year are late term, we know that this bill would save 15,000 plus lives, just if it's that 1%. And we know that it may be more than that. We also know that even though the other side they like to say that abortions after 20 weeks, it's because of maternal health complications or lethal fetal anomalies, things like that, things that were discovered late in pregnancy. But the truth, the science, the research shows that, in fact, that's not true. Most late-term abortions are, in fact, performed because, first, there was a delay in pregnancy diagnosis. The mother didn't know that she was pregnant until later on in the pregnancy. And then, for reasons similar to those given by the first trimester abortion patients, things like financial stressors and relationship problems, education concerns, or parenting challenges, things like that, things that we as a society can come alongside the woman, can come alongside her and her family, can help her and support her and just bolster her and give her the confidence that she needs to choose life.
Catherine, this is, we've got some elections in the Senate coming up. There are some senators that are running in red states, and there's some Democrats running in red states even. And you mentioned the Democrats. And I know there are, it's hard to be a Democrat and pro-life right now. You're under so much pressure from your leadership, but they certainly want to win elections. And so, there will be some, I would think, some leeway from leadership for these people so they can get elected. So I'm just wondering if, I don't know if you've had the time to sit in your organization to sort of make some calculations because I know that, it's great that I think we're eventually going to get this. I think you spoke the truth, but it sure would be nice to get it this time, wouldn't it?
No, it absolutely would. Yes. And we are tracking those elections. We're seeing what the prognosis is, so to speak, for each of these races, and taking a look at where these races are being run and whether it's a more red state or a blue state. Looking at some states, it's almost impossible to win if you don't come out being at least personally pro-life, to the extent that that people say that. And so there is an opening there. We know that there has been pushback from the party leadership on the Democratic side, and so that is tough. But then there is that ongoing debate, and there's always been a pro-life voice, even within the Democratic Party, and we see that increasing again. You see organizations like Democrats for Life, and so many organizations that don't adhere to one party or the other, that are encouraging pro-life Democrats to speak out, to really come into their own as a voice within that party.
Catherine, I noticed that Congressman Smith observed that the vote on this bill in the House came on the anniversary of Kermit Gosnell and his conviction, and thank goodness for that.
Yes.
And I know that I was interested that he said that the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act, this is Congressman Smith speaking, that this bill is needed now more than ever because there are Gosnells all over America dismembering and decapitating pain-capable babies for profit. How does that play into this discussion?
I think it's absolutely a vital part of this discussion. And even the U.S. Supreme Court, in their Hellerstedt decision, emphasized how much of a turning point the Gosnell uncovering how the investigators uncovered what was going on in that house of horrors, everything that was happening there, and then, of course, the trial that saw him convicted for murder. So seeing that, knowing through resources like Americans United for Life's own report, groundbreaking study called Unsafe, uncovering these despicable, unsanitary conditions in America's abortion businesses, we know that Gosnell was not alone. This is going on throughout America, and that it is a real health and safety hazard for women. Some women who have died from this, many women who have been injured from these late-term abortions. And I think that has to be going through our senators, our representatives' minds as they think about this and craft these bills and debate these on the floor.
Catherine, thank you so much for weighing in for us today and joining us. I am so glad to meet you by phone. Since you're leading this great organization, we wish you all the best. We hope you will join us often.
That would be my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. So really a couple of pieces of good news on the life front. First of all, the House of Representatives passing a late-term abortion ban because babies at that age, at 20 weeks, are capable of feeling pain, and you can see it. If you look at the sonogram, if you look at an abortion, which would be a horrible thing to do, via sonography, you can see them pulling back. And certainly children that are that surgery is performed on at that age are given anesthesia. So the science is there, and our ethics need to follow our science in this country. And then the wonderful news that Jeremy has given us, and that you're going to see, that President Trump has actually met his promise, and the Health and Human Services has announced that that part of Obamacare that required a free contraception as preventative care to be provided by all companies and by nonprofits and every really organization will not be required, and it's a new interim rule. It's really good news. So we've got a couple of pieces of good news on the life front. I'm always glad to hear it, Jeremy. And, we can really praise God for it, can't we?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would really encourage folks to go to AUL.org. That's Americans United for Life's website. AUL is a fantastic organization. I know Catherine personally. She and I have worked together as co-counsels on at least one case, and a couple others perhaps we've consulted with each other on. Top-notch attorney and an excellent leader of that organization. For years, I've relied upon AUL for a lot of information personally for my own life, as well as some of the professional work I've done in the past as well. I can testify that they not only know what they're talking about, but they're getting the job done in Washington, D.C. and across the country on these important matters. So
find out more. You could also click through from pointofview.net. You can see Catherine's picture there. And ladies and gentlemen, if you want to weigh in on these two developments in the arena of the sanctity of human life, our number is 800-351-1212. We have a lot more after this.
Would you like to be above average or exceptional? I'll explain how you can be in a moment. What do you think about change? Some people love it, others not so much. I'm guessing you agree our culture needs change, but how will that happen? Change happens with you and your influence. If each of us does our part, God can change the culture through us. That's a goal at Point of View, to help you change things around you. We never charge for the information we deliver each day, but that information is not free. There is a significant cost in getting it to you. You know who helps us do that? About 1 out of every 800 listeners to Point of View. So you can be above average. You can be exceptional by visiting pointofview.net and clicking the banner Change Happens with You, or by calling 1-800-347-5151. Thank you for being exceptional by supporting Point of View. Pointofview.net at 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
And Jeremy Dyes from First Liberty Institute, also in studio with me. It's your weekend edition. And a little bit later in the program, we will, by way of update, talk about the tragedy, what's happened in Las Vegas, what they're finding out as they continue to investigate the shooter, and what are some of the fixes being proposed. Is this call for a bump stock ban on this enhancement to the semi-automatic weapon? Is this a reasonable thing to do or not? So we'll talk about all of that a little bit later in the program. But also, there's an article posted at pointofview.net called Why Christians Will Stick with Trump. It's by Hugh Hewitt. And judging from the announcement made today about religious liberty and protecting it in the HHS mandate and other things, I think they will. And I want to, Jeremy, ask you about another part of what was announced today by the government, because it wasn't only HHS that put out a policy and a new rule. Also, the Department of Justice did. And what was that rule? Yeah,
these are important actions that the agencies are taking today. One, the HHS mandate is no longer a coercive threat to religious ministries and those who have a moral objection to providing these things. But the Department of Justice, you'll remember, again, these both stem from that executive order that the president signed back in, I think it was, May 4th, that he signed this in the Rose Garden, and we've got the contraceptive mandate on its way to its own demise now. But you'll recall that one of the paragraphs there, and I remember talking about this with you, Penna, on this show, as a matter of fact, there was a paragraph in there that directed the federal agency, directed the Department of Justice to develop guidelines for the federal agencies to follow when it comes to religious liberty. And that's actually what's been announced today as well. There are 20 of them in all that the Attorney General has announced, plus a rather lengthy appendix on a few things. But these 20 guidelines are meant to be inserted throughout the entire federal agency as ways for people to understand what religious liberty is and how it's to be followed. So as the memorandum that covers it says, these are 20 principles of religious liberty, and providing an appendix with interpretive guidance for federal law protections. And the Attorney General is, as he says, directing all attorneys within the department to adhere to the interpretive guidance set forth in this memorandum and in the appendix as well, that they're to incorporate the interpretive guidance in litigation strategy and arguments, and that starts immediately. So anything that is in front of the Supreme Court of the United States or things that are at various levels of district courts and courts of appeal, they need to have these implemented and consult these as they're developing those strategies and making those arguments. They need to be used when formulating opinions and providing advice for the executive branch agencies. And so these 20 commandments or 20 principles that are out there right now, these are good things. And I just wanted to read from, let's call it the opening paragraph of these 20 different things. It says this, and I'm quoting directly from the memo from General Sessions. It says, quote, "Religious liberty is not merely a right to personal religious beliefs or even to worship in a sacred place. It also encompasses religious observance and practice. Except in the narrowest circumstances, no one should be forced to choose between living out his or her faith and complying with the law. Therefore, to the greatest extent practicable and permitted by law, religious observance and practice should be reasonably accommodated in all government activity, including employment, contracting, and programming." And it goes on to list out how that's going to take place within the federal government. Well, that's a breath of fresh air from more recent administrations that have questioned what role, if any, religion and religious liberty takes in that administration, but across the board in the country as well. Thankfully, this is also building upon actions by previous presidents. This is not without precedent.
Even President Clinton had some guidelines in this regard.
That's exactly right. President Clinton issued some guidelines when it comes to employment. President Bush issued some when it came to how students and teachers interact with the religious liberty within the school context. Senator Kennedy even relied upon these things to help develop RFRA and different things like that. So presidents and senators and leaders in the government have been doing this for some time. We've got a country that has had a long-standing commitment to religious liberty. This is just one more way in which the Attorney General of the United States is saying, look, there's a body of law out there, statutory law like RFRA and the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, RLUIPA, There is abundant case law out there from Hobby Lobby down to many other decisions that affect the day-to-day lives of millions of Americans. And all he's saying is saying this is what the body of law is, kind of condensed into one document so that litigators within the Department of Justice can have it at the ready to be able to implement into litigation arguments, strategy, and then more importantly, within the body of the administrative state that engages in so much advice giving to the White House as to what policy ought to be. So for the president to take the time now through his attorney general and provide this guidance, these guidelines, is a very important step to protecting religious liberty for all Americans.
Well, how does it affect an organization like First Liberty Institute? Because I feel that during the Obama administration in those 8 years, you were increasingly fighting your own federal government. It didn't used to be that way. It was more the ACLU or the Freedom from Religion Foundation. But in so many cases, it was the federal government fighting on the side, really the wrong side, the side that would impinge on religious liberty, that would, for instance, they defended the same-sex marriage, against, basically they said there would be an exception for religious liberty, but it really violated the religious sensibilities of so many Americans. So in so many ways, they were the foe. And now all of a sudden, because, how quickly can this happen? How will this affect you?
Well, I think that the biggest immediate impact is the reversal of thinking that it takes place. The previous administration viewed religious liberty as a gift that it was free to give out to those to whom he thought or the administration thought were worthy of receiving it.
It's not theirs to give, really.
Well, that's just it. In fact, it states it right up front in this memorandum from the Attorney General itself. He goes back to James Madison in his Memorial and Remonstrance Against Religious Assessments, which is a famous document that every American ought to read. So just Google James Madison and Memorial and Remonstrance. It's an excellent document for you to read and consider. But he says that religious freedom is, quote, is in its nature an unalienable right because the duty owed to one's creator is precedent both in order of time and degree of obligation to the claims of civil society. In other words, you, by virtue of your humanity, have an entitlement to worship and be right with the creator, and to exercise in a peaceful manner your faith towards that creator. You have a duty to that creator, and so government can't get in the way of that duty. But that's now the stated policy of the administration, you see. And because of that, it's saying, oh, okay, wait a minute. We recognize that our citizens have a duty to something higher than government. Now, there are some in the government, especially on the left side of things, that believe that there is no higher duty in this world but to government. This is stating, no, there's something much higher than government itself, and so we're going to respect that. And wherever we possibly can, we're going to accommodate that free exercise of religion, whether that's for protecting preschoolers who grow up in a Native American household and are told that they can't cut their hair. The state can't punish them for that. Or perhaps it's, clients like ours in California who are of the Orthodox Jewish faith and have a practice involving chickens. They can't be told that they can't engage in that when it's a perfectly humane and kosher thing to be able to do, literally kosher, for them to be able to do. We can't have people being fired for their religious beliefs that belong to a public employment just because they've given a sermon with which the government may disagree. Or take the HHS thing, that these colleges, these universities or religious ministries or those with moral convictions like Americans United for Life, you heard Catherine talk about, they can no longer be coerced to violating their religious beliefs and moral sentiments simply because the government believes they ought to do that. This is first saying, no, religion has something very important to do. You have a duty to your creator to act with that moral concert, and so we're going to respect that wherever possible, and only in the slightest of circumstances are we going to do anything to restrict it.
We are taking your calls, and if you've got a comment on this particular development, this is a real positive, and I think it says a lot for, sometimes people are disappointed in the tweets or the statements of this president, but there was this underlying confidence that this administration was actually going to be good for religious liberty, for the rights of Christians. And so today was a day where we could actually see that, and I think it's a real blessing. So we are taking your calls at 800-351-1212. And Susan in Texas, you're the first call I'm going to take. I'm going to wait till after the break, though, because I don't I don't want to cut you off, but I do want to mention one thing about the contraceptive mandate. You know, there's going to be lawsuits over this announcement by the administration. They'll push back. People are saying poor people won't be able to get their contraception and all of that. But that is just such a ridiculous argument. There's so many federal programs and different clinics and ways that people can get contraceptives if they can't afford it. First of all, most contraceptives aren't all that expensive, but if it's too much of a burden, there are still ways for low-income women to get that type of thing. So, that's just been really a specious argument in a sense. Well, ladies and gentlemen, again, our number 800-351-1212. We will have some discussions here and take your calls. And our first one will be Susan in Texas. We'll be right back.
The spectacles created on football fields as players kneel, sit, or raise fists during the national anthem are the latest evidence of the left's success in undermining institutions and traditions that Americans once held dear. These grown men are unwitting pawns of the progressive left in pursuit of its anti-American agenda. The left employs many tactics to undermine the unity that's so desirable in a nation. One is to encourage minorities to embrace victimhood, to divide the society into identity groups. The left encourages allegiance to one's identity, race, gender identity, sexual orientation, over and above allegiance to country or humanity. The left also works tirelessly to overturn, or at least overcome, the results of elections it loses. No election can defeat an entrenched ideology, but holdovers from the previous administration, liberals who populate our administrative state, and an intelligence community that has been weaponized are currently blocking conservative accomplishments. The left is ruthless in its pressure on corporations and nonprofits to enact shameful policies in pursuit of its definition of equality. It's got a lock on public education, especially higher education. It is busy undermining truth and the meaning of words, like male and female. It's spreading the idea that religious or patriotic values are hateful and must be snuffed out. How do we push back? First, we must map the left. We've got to understand the territory. The Israelites sent men to spy out the land of Canaan. They found the land to be exceedingly good. They also saw pitfalls. They reported, the people are strong and the cities are fortified and very large. When we do this kind of mapping, we learn the left has many small organizations. Many of these are tiny, really well-funded shells. But the left is visible and very organized. Joshua and Caleb assessed the obstacles and eventually led the people into the land. The Lord was with them. We also must enlist His help. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter, your host for Friday Weekend Edition, along with Jeremy Dyes from First Liberty Institute. And as we mentioned, this was the breaking news today. The Department of Justice is ordering federal agencies to respect religious freedom in many ways, and also the Department of Health and Human Services ending the Obama-led contraceptive mandate. This is what Tony Perkins said from Family Research Council. After 8 years of the federal government's relentless assault on the First Amendment, the Trump administration has taken concrete steps today that will once again erect a bulwark of protection around America's first freedom, religious freedom. If you would like to weigh in on that or on the fetal pain bill, We would love to hear from you. 800-351-1212. Let's go to Susan in Texas. Hi, Susan. Thanks for calling.
Hi, Penna. I know you're off the fetal pain bill.
No, we're still on all of them. All of them are game, yes, for discussion.
Well, real quick. If it goes to the Senate and there are some people there that believe they should still be pro-abortion, how would they reason to vote for the fetal pain bill? It seems to me that you don't want to cause somebody pain, but you don't mind murdering them.
Well, I think
that doesn't make any sense. How would they reason to vote for it? Should they think they're supposed to still be pro-abortion?
Yeah, that's a good point.
What you're saying is from the smaller children up to 5 months, since we think we're not hurting them, we don't mind murdering them. But then the one that we think we're going to hurt, we don't want to murder them.
You're talking like a pure pro-lifer. Yeah, Susan, let me just weigh in. You've made that very good point, and I want to kind of respond, and Jeremy can too. You're purely pro-life. I agree with you. But I know that the pro-life effort that's taken place ever since Roe versus Wade became the law of the land, really that court decision resulted in abortion across the nation. We've been restricting abortion in various ways. It's been very, very gradual and slow. And the fetal pain bill is just a common sense bill to say this baby can feel the pain. It's just another horrible thing about abortion at that stage. So we can throw this out there before these members of the House and the Senate and, use sort of the humanitarian argument, and we can get rid of some more abortions. I mean, we've done it through parental consent bills. We've done it through forcing or asking abortion facilities to meet certain medical standards so there aren't as many abortion facilities now. There's just lots of ways that informed consent bills, requiring a sonogram of the abortion to be given to the mother. There are just many, many ways that we are showing that this is a child worthy of protection. This is another way. Yes, I would love to ban every abortion that ever happens. So far, it's not happened, and I'm not saying it's out of the realm of possibility someday, but this is a good step, isn't it, Jeremy?
I think also Susan's point is that how do they reason that, okay, maybe I'll vote for the 20-week ban, but then turn around and vote for pro-abortion bills that would allow you to abort up to 20 weeks. And the problem with that is rather obvious. I think we all understand it, that it's really difficult to apply logic to a liberal politician. If you got to remain consistent, it's very difficult for that to be the case. But this is exactly the reason why why those in the pro-life community present these kinds of bills and challenges directly to our politicians to say, where are you on this? I mean, how much are you worshiping at this altar of abortion here? Are you willing to say, okay, once it's halfway out the birth canal, you're willing to kill it there or not? Well, some politicians are. And that's frightening to me, but many, when confronted with that, realize, okay, that's a problem. Okay, if you can't go that far, let's say, let's back it up to 20 weeks, 5 months or so into the pregnancy. They're starting to feel pain there, and we have the science to prove it. Are you willing to have children in the womb experience excruciating burning, pain, and just terrible suffering to go through a dismemberment abortion, for instance? Is that how callous you are? Are you willing to do that? Well, maybe they can't do that. Okay, great. Now we've gotten to that. Where do you go from there? So it is gently pushing in front of them the harsh realities of this procedure and confronting them with their own logic and consistency to the point where they realize, hopefully, well, this is in fact a life. And regardless of its ability to feel pain or not, it is a conceived life, one that we ought to protect even from the moment of conception onward.
I've said, even with the partial birth abortion ban, which was, I think, another very wise and common sense step to take in protecting life, a picture is worth 1,000 words. When you think about that baby, that is a baby. The word fetus, I don't think even applies at 5 months anymore in my mind. It's a baby. It's moved. This baby is moving. This baby looks like a baby when you look at the sonogram. And so that picture, it just changes hearts and minds. It's been doing it. We've been, the millennial generation is more pro-life than its parents. So as people get used to the technology, they see into the womb. My children, who all have children of their own, they were so excited to bring home that picture from the first sonogram to show me that that's the first baby picture now.
I'll never forget my second born was diagnosed with some in utero complications and potentially had markers that would be signs for genetic abnormality. And we were recommended to consider therapeutically aborting my child. Really presented that to the wrong guy when that presentation was made. And we were glad at that point to say, no, this child has been created for me and my wife in the particular way that he has, and we love him to death. He was not born with those genetic abnormalities, but we're sitting in October, which is Down Syndrome Awareness Month, and it's good for us to remember that there are a high percentage of those who are diagnosed. My son was misdiagnosed with Down syndrome. He does not have it. But there
Did you know that up to the day he was born?
No, we would not have known that until he came out. But it didn't matter to us whatsoever, of course. But there are thousands of children who are, maybe I overstate, at least hundreds of children every year who are aborted on suspicion of genetic abnormality like Down syndrome. And that's a travesty. And we ought to be speaking wildly against that, to say this is an affront to our created order for us to be slowly removing people who are otherwise fine contributors to society. I have a cousin whose son has Down syndrome. He's a wonderful child. And we ought to be encouraging to the promotion of that beautiful child and the contribution they provide to life. We got people in Iceland right now where it's a 0% of
and
people
proud
that have
of it.
Yeah, they got 100% coverage of abortion rate of Down syndrome people. This is horrible. But this is one more thing. This Pain Capable Protection Act that just is saying, are you going to confront this or not? Look, the science is clear. These children are feeling intense pain, like you and I would if someone poured acid on you, or if they stuck you with a needle or a knife. They're feeling that pain when you're doing this procedure. How callous are you on this matter? And they've got to choose themselves as politicians how they're going to answer that. Liberal politicians have an answer. I think it's a bad one, but it's one that they're willing to stick forward with, and I guess that's for the voters to decide whether or not they continue to remain in office.
If you want to make a difference in this election, I would say confront senators, especially Democrat senators that are running for re-election right now. Confront them with this question. I think it's something that pro-life Americans across the nation should be talking about. Just talk it up. Perhaps write an editorial, an op-ed in your newspaper. I mean, it's really fairly simple to just kind of make the case for the humanity.
Absolutely. And I would go one step further. Find out where your senator or congressman has their local office, and go take your local senator or congressman's legislative director or whoever's manning that home office, take them to coffee and sit them down and get to know them. Develop that relationship there so that they know who you are and what your position in that community's position is on this matter. Develop that relationship, because it will pay off manifold times later on.
We are taking your calls, 800-351-1212. If you're waiting, please keep waiting over the break. We will get to your calls, and more of you can call in. We are discussing the sanctity of human life today, and we'll be back.
At dinner recently, I was struck by the couple in front of me. They were allegedly spending a night out together, but the only time they communicated in a half hour was one time when the man showed what was on his phone to the woman, and then back to their own screens. We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You'll find us online with your phone, your tablet, your laptop. Search for the Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues. You can also follow our new YouTube video series, Uncensored. Stay informed. Follow us on Twitter at Point of View RTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Again, at Point of View RTS. We'd love you to retweet us, to share our Facebook posts, but please don't do it when you're out with your family or someone you love. We can wait. We're online 24 hours a day. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Welcome back to Point of View. Jeremy Dyes is with me, and we're going to bring a new issue into this discussion today, Jeremy. It's actually not a new issue. This has been around a while. In 2012, the Kuntz, Texas School District, basically they had an issue about cheerleaders who wanted to write Bible verses on the banners that the football players run through at the game. You probably remember this case. We've talked about it many times. And it's been going through the court system, and now there's been a new development on it. We actually saw a piece by Todd Starnes in Fox News, which we posted. But this is First Liberty Institute's case. So, Jeremy, explain what's happened.
Yeah, 2012, the Kuntz High School cheerleaders had these run-through banners. I'm sure you've probably seen them in some manner or form. They really big banners have a message on them, like "Go beat the Tigers" or "Destroy the Pirates" or whatever it might be. And these football players, being big and tough, run through a thin piece of paper, and that's a cool thing. And so they had this back in 2012. The Kuntz School decided to ban these banners because they had religious messages on them. Well, the cheerleaders actually are kind of an independent body there. They're actually not a club or anything like that of the school.
They were paying for the banners.
They paid for the banners. They paid for the paint. They created the message. They chose the messages themselves. Everything was perfectly fine in the community until someone complained about it all, and the school took a real hard stand on it. And so we've been litigating that case since 2012. And just last week, the court here in Texas finally made a decision. The Court of Appeals for the 9th District in Texas here made the decision that it was perfectly fine for these banners, that these were in fact private speech that were subject to the protections of the First Amendment, that just because they appear on school grounds or somewhere near a school building, the school is not allowed to claim ownership of that message and therefore convert it to some sort of government speech that needs to be more neutral to things. So we're really pleased that, again, religious liberty has been vindicated, that cheerleaders across the state of Texas have the right to have this religious message on their banners at these high school football games, and hope that it'll bring clarity and closure to the issue for all Texas students, and hopefully beyond that to the country.
I remember when the case first started, there was so much support on Facebook for these cheerleaders. It was really cute. And other cheerleaders in other states across the country were doing their own banners and sort of challenging the system. I know that it's not that the cheerleaders have not been able to do these banners the past few years. There was some kind of a decision that allowed them to do it, but it was still considered to be government speech. Is that the change now?
That was the complete debate here, is whether or not this was going to be characterized as government speech or private speech. And without getting into the deep weeds of what that means, it's basically government speech is when the government speaks. And so the government has to be neutral towards religion. It can't favor one, can't oppose one. It just has to be neutral towards religion. Or was this going to be, in fact, private speech, which means it's private like you and I are private? We have the ability to say what we want within degrees that are protected by the First Amendment. Well, if it's protected by the First Amendment, it's private speech, then these things have the highest level of protection possible. If it's a message by the state, by the school, then it has to meet a lot more strict or discussions on things. So that's what the court was confronted with. Is this going to be government speech that has to be restrained, or is it private speech of these students? So in other words, was it the speech of Kuntz High School, or was it the speech of their cheerleaders or the cheerleaders themselves? And the court here ruled, no, this is the speech of the students themselves. They picked the message. They wrote it on a piece of paper. They bought the paper. They bought the paint. They hold the paper. This is clearly the message of the students, and no reasonable observer would think otherwise.
So the girls that actually, and their parents that actually filed the suit have all graduated by now, I'm sure. But I'm sure they're applauding and saying, really, it was an effort for them. It was a little scary. I remember when they were all deposed. And, they had to be kind of coached and all that in order to do that. You guys did a great job. I think you performed a great service. And we're glad to see this resolution.
Well, we're proud of the students themselves. I mean, look, these were sophomores and juniors and seniors in high school that had a lot of other things on their minds other than a lawsuit. They had a lot of future plans that this was not factored into. And yet they were saying, well, if we give up on this, then what does it mean for the cheerleaders down the road from us that come year after year behind us? What happens then? What about the students across the country that are facing the same issue? If we back down on this, we lose a little bit of freedom ourselves, but the whole country loses a lot more. And so, I applaud these young ladies for being willing to stand up and take a hit on this and protect a very important principle of our freedom.
Let's go back to the phones. Lots of folks are waiting. Carol is in Ohio listening in on WGGN. Hi, Carol. Thank you for calling. Hey, Carol,
Hello.
Are you there?
Hear me?
Yeah, turn your radio down.
Okay.
Great.
Are you there?
Yeah, what's your comment?
Okay, my comment is the churches and the religious people, the Christians, have to get behind our United States government law officials that make the laws to make them understand that everything has to be written precisely, because our religious freedoms, our religious liberties, and our religious observations for the immigrants or people that were born in this country that feel that they can go ahead and the sanctity of life of people that were already born, and they can do female genital mutilation on them and take away their feminine parts.
Okay, so are you asking, does the religious liberty, or you're saying religious liberty does not extend to that practice of genital mutilation?
Right. We have to make sure that when everything's written in there so that we can have our religious freedoms and we can have our religious liberties and the observations, that these other people cannot come in and say, listen, because that right now there's a female genital mutilation case that's going on in Michigan, it's federal law that they're not allowed to do that in our country or send females out of the country for vacation cutting. And we have to make sure it's written in there that they cannot say this is our freedom observation. We can do this.
Okay, there are certain practices, Jeremy, that are just egregious that are claimed as being a religious practice.
Yeah, look, there was a case actually in Indiana not too long ago where a mother took a hanger and beat her son with the hanger and claimed she was doing it to drive the demons out of him because he had engaged in some very inappropriate behavior with his sister. And she was arrested, I think rightly so, and convicted on that matter. She tried to claim the defense of RFRA, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act in Indiana, as her defense, and the court rejected that because whatever burden on her religious freedom was present there, it was incidental to the overall compelling interest of the state to be able to protect the welfare and the health and safety of children. That same kind of thing applies in these other circumstances as well. Whatever incidental religious freedom is burdened, there's a very strong, compelling interest that I think we can all agree on that the state has in protecting children in this country.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for bringing it up, Carol. We appreciate it. Let's go now to Texas. Ray is listening in on KLGS. Hi, Ray. Thanks for calling.
Hello, Ms. Dexter. How are y'all this afternoon?
Great.
Okay, I've got a question. Ma'am, in the Bible, can you point out...
You know what? I've just realized I've taken your call with like 30 seconds before the break. Can you hold and we'll let you ask your question after the break. Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Point of View, and we are taking your calls at 800-351-1212. Religious liberty is on the table and the sanctity of human life. We are going to get to some updates on the horrific happenings in Las Vegas, and we'll do all of that right after this. Stay with us.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You know, for decades, sociologists have documented the phenomenon of extended adolescence. This is where someone who is an adult still acts like a teenager. One classic example would be a 35-year-old who has part of their rent and bills covered by parents and continues to take college classes. Jean Twenge, in her latest research on the trailing edge millennials, who she calls iGen, are extending this phenomenon even further. She documents that teenagers are becoming adults even later than the last generation. She argues that teens today are less prepared for adulthood. She also adds that they are safer since the rates of car accidents and teen pregnancies have fallen dramatically. Fewer 12th graders have tried alcohol. Back in 1994, 85% had tried alcohol. Today, only 66% have tried alcohol. Only 73% of 12th graders have driver's license, down from 85% 20 years ago. One of the most dramatic differences can be found in social dating. Only about half of them have been on a date. Compare that to 83% of 12th graders who had been on a date back in 1994 by their senior year. Another dramatic difference is one that we've talked about in the past, work experience. About half of 12th graders have worked for pay, which is down from 72% in 1994. Many more are taking college prep classes or hanging out at home. Now, all of these dramatic changes have resulted in a relatively new term being used by sociologists, emerging adulthood. This is their attempt to describe a new life stage between adolescence and adulthood. All of this reminds me of the jingle, "I don't want to grow up, I'm a Toys R Us kid." Maybe it's time for adults to say to the kids, it's time to grow up. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter. Jeremy Dyes is in studio with me. And Jeremy's an attorney with First Liberty Institute. And another attorney, Hugh Hewitt, who's also a talk show host, wrote a piece that appeared today in the opinions section in the Washington Post. And he's talking about, well, the title is Why Christians Will Stick with Trump. We posted it at pointofview.net. And he says the genuinely confused should realize that for millions of voters, religious liberty remains the overarching issue of the day, the alpha and omega of whether Trump gets a nod of approval or at least a pass. And most of those voters are very well aware that religious liberty is on the Supreme Court's docket this term. And Jeremy, actually, the Supreme Court kind of goes back into its session. It will be deciding cases, hearing cases beginning this week. And there's one that is a big religious liberty case, the Masterpiece Cake Shop case, which has to do with baking a cake for a homosexual wedding. So that is actually going to the Supreme Court this week. It's going to be very interesting. And there are other cases. So I think today was a day of, in a sense, a lot of parts of the Religious Liberty Institute coming together because you have the Supreme Court listening to this case and other cases. And then you have these announcements by the Trump administration. So religious liberty is really out there front and center, isn't it?
It's a pretty big deal. And I think I'm with Hugh Hewitt in saying that I think people of faith are going to be relatively pleased with President Trump. They've got some concerns, obviously. But when they see things like the judges that are being appointed, these protections for religious liberty, the resolution, the HHS contraception mandate, all those things put together, they say, yeah, he may have his faults and he may be a little bit crazy, but he's my kind of crazy and he's doing the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, we look at this president, and I remember a lot of pastors came around him, And many would say, well, he's a Christian. I know he is. And, I don't know that we know that for sure. He may be, but he has actually protected our religious liberty. That's what we were hoping for, counting on. It's the question in the back of the minds of believers, especially those who really live it out in their life, and they want to be able to do that. They're concerned about their rights to do that. They've seen a lot of them trampled under the Obama administration, especially. So I think there's just some light shed on all of that today.
I think so, and hopefully there will be a lot more to follow.
Mm-hmm. Hope so. Well, we are taking your calls. Let's go now to South Carolina. Joan is listening in on GNN. Thanks, Joan, for calling.
Oh, thank you for taking my call. How are you doing today?
Great.
Great. Okay, well, I wanted to comment on the women's rights. I am pro-life. However, I do believe that women should have the right to make decisions and choices about their own bodies. I think that all women are smart and intelligent, and that God, gave them compassion and care and understanding, and they are nurturing individuals, so they should have that right. I do not think that government should legislate anything about a woman's body.
So what do you think? I mean, we brought the issue up today with regard to fetal pain bills, which basically say that, beyond 5 months or 20 weeks, the fetus can feel pain. So this would be a ban on abortion beyond that. So do you think that's too much of a restriction?
Oh, no. I don't want a child to be hurt at all. Children should be cared for from inception on.
I don't understand what you're saying about a woman's body then. I mean, really, a baby isn't a part of a woman's body, but that is an argument of the pro-choicers.
Oh, I think it is a part of her body. And I think life begins at conception. All I'm saying is I think it should be given that choice to the woman, and that there should be no government legislation, because I think it's unfair when you think about it, because there's no governmental legislation on a man's body. I think that a woman should be able to make that choice.
Okay.
That's between her and her God.
That's the argument. That's definitely been the pro-choice argument across the ages. Men aren't given the privilege of bearing children. It's a great privilege to be able to bear a child. The child is not a part of your body. It's a uniquely created human being that resides in the woman's body for 9 months and then is birthed. And then hopefully the mother takes good care afterwards too.
Right. I just think there's too much legislation, and I think that would be one part that should be taken off the table. And I think that it would be better, because then it's going to be between her and her God and her husband. And I just think that too much government legislation.
Okay, I get what you're saying. I guess I just want to ask you one more question before I let you go. So what do you think of all the restrictions we've placed on abortion? You say there's too much legislation. We've placed a restriction on young women being able to have an abortion without their parents' permission. We've placed restrictions on them needing to have good information called informed consent. We've placed restrictions on the partial birth abortion, which is almost born baby, halfway out down the birth canal and coming out. And all of those kinds of restrictions, are those part of your definition of too much legislation?
Oh, no. I think all those facts are necessary. That once a woman is informed, then she can make a right and wise decision, consulting the Lord, in what she should do. But I think no baby should be aborted, ever. I'm pro-life.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for calling.
Yeah, and thank you for what you do.
All right, thank you. I'm not sure. I'm glad she's pro-life, but I don't know what the call is about then.
To follow it and all that, if you agree that children should, as she said, protected from conception on, and yet there's a desire to protect a woman's body, there's no disagreement here. We want to protect women's bodies as well. We want to protect them from the abortionist and the intrusive effect that has upon a woman's body to have an abortion. So maybe there's a better caller out there.
Maybe. And we are taking your calls at 800-351-1212. I think, Jeremy, before we get too far along the program, let's just talk a little bit about, really what everybody's been thinking about all week. And that is what happened Sunday. And it's dominated the news all this week because of the shooter in Las Vegas that killed 59 people and wounded so many, around 500. And, they're just looking to try to, we all wondered, why would someone do this? We haven't seen really a terrorist motive underneath it, although that's not totally been ruled out. Some of the things we have learned is that the shooter, Stephen Paddock's dad, was a bank robber, which is kind of interesting. When he was 7 years old, his dad was actually arrested, and he really wasn't. I think his mom just took the kids away, and he never really saw him again. It looks like he didn't plan to actually die in that 32nd floor hotel room. The sheriff there is saying that there's evidence that he was doing everything possible to see if he could escape, but ended up taking his own life when authorities kind of closed in on him. He rented this room at another Las Vegas hotel a week before. That's another kind of piece of news that came out yesterday. That overlooked another music festival. I don't think he ever checked into that hotel. He may have. And in July, he booked a hotel in Chicago for the dates of the Lollapalooza concert, which takes place there. He never showed up for that. There's some news about Fenway Park, which is also a concert venue in Boston, and him scouting that out. So that's kind of a weird thought that he may have been, targeting concerts.
And this is going to occupy the minds of those who like to go down conspiracies for a long time. And I think rightly so. It's a very bizarre circumstance. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there are any good and simple answers to the whole situation other than to say this is yet again evidence of people who are ruled by their hearts. And those are desperately wicked things. We can have a debate upon bump stocks and other things, but it ultimately is going to end in frustration because there are so many other acts of violence, be it from the combination of specific fertilizers and a detonator or the use of hands and feet and knives. We can't possibly look through every single corner to get these things corrected. We should have a discussion, quite obviously. We need to, but at the end of the day, it's hard to stop a heart that is set upon violence and wickedness, and that's exactly what we've seen in this horrible act out in Las Vegas.
It's really heartbreaking, and I think a lot of times all of us want to we want to fix right away. We want to say, let's do something that will make this never happen again. And I think perhaps conservatives and Christians, because we understand the sinfulness of man, we see that that's not possible to do. But on the left, often they just want to say they've done something. And, so that's where all the cries for gun control come from. We'll talk about it more after the break. And we continue to take your calls on all these issues we've been discussing today at 800-351-1212.
Is religious freedom still a cornerstone of the republic, or has it effectively been crushed by the forces of tolerance? America needs Christians to be informed and as unified as possible, applying God's wisdom to civic life. Point of view can be a key part of a successful mission. I believe in America. I believe God wants His best for us. We can face whatever the world throws at us as long as we stand together. If you have not signed on, please do it now. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Set up your monthly gift by clicking the Truth Team 360 picture and then carefully follow the directions. Pointofview.net. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Or call us 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
And Jeremy Dyes is in studio with me. We've got a lot of calls to get to. One that I neglected to go back to after a break. Ray waiting in Texas. Ray, thanks for waiting. Go ahead.
Hello, Miss Dexter. How are you this afternoon, young lady?
Great.
Right. I need to ask you something. In the 5,200 years of history concerning God, do you think the Almighty is going to condone 60 million abortions?
Absolutely not.
Well, don't you think mankind would answer to that himself if they made it that far to heaven to talk to him about it?
You know,
I think so.
I mean, are you talking about people who say in their discussion that it's between a woman and her God? Because I think if you were really listening to God, you wouldn't make the decision for abortion.
But do you think? So does that mean that he would condone it himself?
No, I don't think God ever condones abortion. Do you?
I hope not. I mean, he didn't. He can't condone me. I mean, I got to be born. So
yeah,
that's the way I look at it. But he spared me, so, and my brother also. So
yeah, abortion is just an evil that I think we should not countenance, and we should, anyone that comes to us and wants to know if it would be right to have an abortion in this circumstance, it's never right. What's right is in those situations where someone doesn't think they can care for a child is to help them.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, what else? Do you have another comment, or should we let you go?
Isn't it ironic that we have to ask the Supreme Court how we can worship the Lord?
Yeah, you're placing things in very simplistic terms. What are you referring to?
Well, we have to wait for a decision of the Supreme Court whenever they want to get their work done.
Are you talking about the masterpiece case about same-sex marriage and baking a cake?
I mean, just human relation and religion in general. And I mean, all the Protestants, Catholics, and whatever that they can't say the Lord's Prayer or anything like that, and it's against the law. So
yeah, I haven't heard that one. Listen, Ray, thank you so much for your call. We appreciate you joining the discussion today.
Oh, I think Ray's right on some point that it's kind of annoying that we've actually got to seek the protections of courts to be able to freely exercise our faith. And that is absolutely true. It's unfortunate that we do that. But at the same time, think about it this way, too. Thank God for a system of government that allows us to take our petitions of something that's gone wrong to court. And my kids were asking me the other day, my wife said, "Boys, do you really understand what Daddy does?" And they kind of looked at me like, "Well, I think so, but maybe I should say no, so Daddy will explain." And so I said, guys, there's been cultures throughout history that have had disagreements with one another, and the way that people have resolved them have oftentimes been violent and mean and rude. We have chosen as a society that if we're going to have a disagreement with people, rather than picking up a gun or a sword, we're actually going to take each other to court and discuss it there. It's a much better way of resolving these, but it's not as sometimes as effective, perhaps, at least not as quick as some of those other resolutions could be.
Not as efficient sometimes.
Yeah, but it does at least allow for an intellectual discussion to take place and reasonable minds to come to a conclusion and reason with one another. That's why we have the court system, that we're able to take our petitions to them and say, look, here's what the law says. Here's what has actually happened. Here's how we think the law has been violated. Your Honor, what do you think? This also then speaks to how important it is for us to have good men and women on the bench in this country, men and women who are going to understand the law and how to rule justly on these matters.
A piece of news today, speaking of judges, we've been complaining about the slow pace of the confirmation of Mr. Trump's judges, and two were actually, I think, either moved forward or confirmed. One of them was the one who was the victim of Dianne Feinstein's remarks about her dogma living too loudly within her. Her name was Amy Barrett, I believe. Mm-hmm. And also there's another one, Joan Larson out of Michigan, who I think they've been confirmed to circuit courts. I'll look up that in a minute. But, I want to go back to the caller, Ray. I think one thing that we have to do when we are talking about religious liberty is if there's a threat to religious liberty and we're complaining about it or fighting against it, we have to make sure that it really is a threat because, saying something like you're not allowed to say the Lord's Prayer, I mean, I would have to get the specific instance where someone was prevented from saying the Lord's Prayer.
We had a case not too
Did you?
dissimilar to that in here in Texas, where there was a senior center, and the seniors there wanted to be able to pray over their meal, and the senior center officials, who was a state-run institution, or at least received some state funding, so that they couldn't do that without violating the Constitution. And I remember one of the plaintiffs, one of our clients, at a press conference said, we kind of opened it up, which is kind of rare, but we opened up to the clients to say something. He said, well, I want to say something. He says, I don't mind going to jail so long as people tell them why I went to jail for praying. And it's always struck me that it's unfortunate that people would be threatened with going to jail for praying, and yet we have a country that's dedicated to religious freedom. But this is how we protect religious freedom. We prevent people from going to jail for exercising their faith, and we make sure that people are able to freely exercise that faith without that threat.
I can't find the piece, but I was just very happy to see those two judges who were being blocked and stopped, and they were good conservative. And really, one of them said she was Catholic, and she was even questioned by Dick Durbin in the Judiciary Committee. Are you too Catholic? And, those types of questions are egregious in a country like this. And, just having this this announcement from the Justice Department, to me, it sets a tone for, I think, a lot of things that go on in our government that will help just everybody in their discussions to understand that religious liberty is something to be protected, not something to be minimized or mocked.
Well, and that's what scares me and concerns me about the senators going so deeply into the faith backgrounds of these judges. Article 6 of the Constitution prevents and requires that our state officials not institute a religious test for office. We're creeping very, very close to that. So you have to ask yourself, why did the founders include that little line in Article 6 of the Constitution? Well, it was to make sure that everybody would be qualified to be able to serve in government. In past cultures, there have been people that have had a majority faith that operated that government and kept excluded people, disqualified them from office because they held to a different faith or had no faith at all. And so what the Constitution has done there, again, consistent with the First Amendment, as we've explained it, is to have been neutral and require government to remain neutral when it comes to religion, even when it comes to people who are going to be occupying those offices like judges and otherwise, that there would be no test instituted of them, but they would be able to serve because we welcome a diverse society here of a diverse people serving within the government itself. A good reflection of the people it needs to be had within the government itself.
Yeah, and the other side of this is that whoever is in the executive branch, whoever is in the White House, that's part of their job is to choose judges and to nominate them, and then the Senate would confirm. But constitutionally, the president should get his judges.
Yeah, I think so. And it's important for the Senate, of course, to evaluate them and provide their advice and consent. But that is largely a simple check and balance and not one that is used as it's currently being used as a very political shibboleth against the other side to say, we didn't like you being elected, so we're not going to let you take any kind of steps on things. Meanwhile, we've got hundreds of judges, literally hundreds of seats open right now, waiting for positions. And don't forget, there are several million cases filed every single year. So it's important that we have district court judges that are handling those several thousands of opinion or of cases that are filed every year, and the tens of thousands of cases that go to the courts of appeal where we need judges to be weighing in on there. It's not enough for us to remain focused and vigilant on the Supreme Court of the United States, where 80 or 90 cases on a good year will get to the Supreme Court, while meanwhile we've got 500,000 cases waiting for a decision in the lower courts.
And anyone who's listening online or who wants to go online during the break, my commentary would be there. And it was just a small effort at sort of explaining the power of the left in the country. And, I'm going to delve much more deeply into this when I host on Tuesday. But that's just part of the way the left retains its influence, I think, is to slow down a president like President Trump, slow down the confirmation of judges, slow down the confirmation of his appointments. We've got holdover Obama appointees remaining in the government throughout the government. And that's part of the reason why it took so long, for instance, to get the announcement today on religious liberty, because there wasn't the urgency, because everybody who's not on board with it that's still in government. So, we need to move forward already on this. And, part of it was, I think the Trump administration got a little bit of a slow start in nominating, but that's gone now. There's plenty of nominees. They need to be confirmed.
That's right. These are well-qualified men and women. Think of the recent nominees to the Fifth Circuit here. Kyle Duncan, who I know well, very fine attorney, served as Louisiana's first Solicitor General, worked diligently in private practice in a variety of different circumstances. There are many, many others. They require an up or down vote. We ought to be able to give it to them.
And we'll be right back. We are continuing to take your calls. Stay with us.
The spectacles created on football fields as players kneel, sit, or raise fists during the national anthem are the latest evidence of the left's success in undermining institutions and traditions that Americans once held dear. These grown men are unwitting pawns of the progressive left in pursuit of its anti-American agenda. The left employs many tactics to undermine the unity that's so desirable in a nation. One is to encourage minorities to embrace victimhood, to divide the society into identity groups. The left encourages allegiance to one's identity, race, gender identity, sexual orientation, over and above allegiance to country or humanity. The left also works tirelessly to overturn, or at least overcome, the results of elections it loses. No election can defeat an entrenched ideology, but holdovers from the previous administration, liberals who populate our administrative state, and an intelligence community that has been weaponized are currently blocking conservative accomplishments. The left is ruthless in its pressure on corporations and nonprofits to enact shameful policies in pursuit of its definition of equality. It's got a lock on public education, especially higher education. It is busy undermining truth and the meaning of words, like male and female. It's spreading the idea that religious or patriotic values are hateful and must be snuffed out. How do we push back? First, we must map the left. We've got to understand the territory. The Israelites sent men to spy out the land of Canaan. They found the land to be exceedingly good. They also saw pitfalls. They reported, the people are strong and the cities are fortified and very large. When we do this kind of mapping, we learn the left has many small organizations. Many of these are tiny, really well-funded shells. But the left is visible and very organized. Joshua and Caleb assessed the obstacles and eventually led the people into the land. The Lord was with them. We also must enlist His help. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Just another piece of information with regard to judicial confirmations. President Trump apparently has still faced a slower pace of confirmations than that of Presidents Bush or Obama. Both at this point in their presidencies had nearly half of their nominees confirmed. President Bush had 358 of his 610 nominations cleared. Obama had 341 out of 505. President Trump has only had 161 out of 398. So see, Jeremy, he actually has probably been slower on actually nominating people too, so that's part of it. But whatever it is, it needs to move faster.
Absolutely. I mean, there are excellent people that are out there waiting to be confirmed. Don Willett, the Twitter laureate of Texas, for instance, is still out there. Good friend. James Ho is a personal friend of mine here in Dallas. A great
Hasn't he
lawyer.
worked on some Liberty
He
Liberty
has,
cases?
as a matter of fact. In fact, the Coons cheerleaders case, he was lead counsel on that. There are others that are out there. Professor Bibas, David Strauss of Minnesota, who Senator Franken seems to have a real bone to pick with for no good reason, from what we can
Too
tell.
conservative, probably.
Who knows exactly what the reasons are? But you got Professor Barrett from Notre Dame, who has just been. They've been through the process. They've been evaluated 6 ways to Sunday. They're just not being given an up or down vote. Now, we can put a lot of blame on the left side of that aisle for sure, but let's make sure we remember that Senator McConnell controls the flow of who comes up for votes when, and that needs to continue to move forward.
Yeah, and also, I've just noticed the Senate taking a lot of time off. I mean, this one article that I'm looking at says that really they basically worked about 2.5 days a week. So,
well, some would argue that that's 2.5 days too many, I suppose.
Well, not when you're trying to confirm the White House's nominations.
Well, the problem is that they seem to be working on the wrong things, and we'd like to see them getting back to working on the right things for the American people.
Let's go back to the phones. Bear is in South Carolina listening in on WGAP. Hi, Bear.
Hey, how are you, Penna?
Great.
I'm glad y'all are here.
We cannot hear you. Can you talk right into your phone? I am so sorry. I'm going to just put you on hold, see if you can get a better spot. Let's go to Teresa in South Carolina on WLPE. Hi, Teresa.
Hey, Penna. Thank you so much for taking my call. I wanted to speak to the issue of abortion, and I had some difficulty understanding exactly what point your caller, a couple of calls back, what point she was trying to make. But I would just like to share with you guys and with other people listening that I had I got pregnant when I was 15, and my mother had all of us when she was young, and I was pretty much taken to Planned Parenthood, where I was shown a video of the worst case scenario if I had the child. It was a video that showed, a young couple arguing and the baby screaming, and they didn't have this and that. And so, of course, they, wanted me to, have an abortion. I was going to church at the time. I was involved in a youth group, spoke to my pastor, had no idea there was such a thing as a crisis pregnancy center. And my parents were they were scared really because of the difficulties that they went through being young and having 3 children. And I will tell you, now, I mean, I'm in the medical field. I did end up having an abortion. I did not want to, and I remember actually looking at strangers in public and thinking, I wonder if they would help me, or she looks like she's a great mom. I wonder if I could go live with her as a teenager. I've never, ever heard anyone say that had their baby, and whether they gave that child up for adoption or whether they kept that baby, and even if they had to live in poverty, I've never heard someone say, I regret having my child. And what I have found is that people in our country say that they support abortion or a woman's right, but I have never had anyone say to me that they know exactly what happens in that abortion medical procedure. And I will tell you that when I have dealt with a lot of people that, I've asked if they knew, and they were staunchly pro-abortion, and when they were educated, the truth changed them. And I think, number one, the church has a huge responsibility. If you can't do anything then you can pray. But one thing that I never did get from the church was any direction or any kind of true help. So we need
You must
to,
have felt very lost because you didn't have your parents to help you through it in a way that you maybe in your heart of hearts knew would have been right, and that would have been not to have an abortion, but your parents weren't taking you in that direction, were
right. No,
That would be hard.
It was extremely traumatic. But I will tell you, and one, I heard a pastor on TV one day say, if you have ever had an abortion, I want you to know that your baby is in heaven. And I had nobody had ever told me that. And so I'm so excited that I know that, I have a child in heaven, and I have other children that I've raised and are grown. But I really just wanted to make the point that we need to love, as Christians, we need to love people. We need to love them sacrificially. And the women that have had abortions, we need to love them. And if you're going to say, well, I am pro-life, and I'm staunchly pro-life, and whatever it may be, you also need to examine yourself, and you need to think, what is it that you are truly doing to show that you can be something, but what are you doing? And we need to pray, because nothing is going to change the hearts of our leaders other than prayer. And we need to pray. We need to love these women that have had abortions. They need to know that their babies are alive in heaven. And we need to be truthful and stop just saying, well, abortion.
Teresa, thank you. Thank you. I've got to just say thank you for calling, for sharing your story. We're just about up to the end of the show, and this was an appropriate, I think, call to get here at the end. So thank you, Teresa. And, I know you've been through pain. It's been hard, and I'm just going to pray that the Lord would bless you and then make your experience count for him. And thanks again for calling.
Thank you so much.
Jeremy, that, it's very true. We both know, as we've seen the pro-life movement, that there is a helping, healing, loving part of that. All these groups that will bring in women, that will show them that, they shouldn't abort their baby. We should never offer that up as an answer. And so, Teresa, thank you so much for your call.
She says it so well. You can be something, but what are you doing? And I think it's an appropriate place for us to leave the conversation today. You can be a lot of things, but what are you doing about it?
Jeremy, thank you for being here. It's been great to have you for the discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, I pray you would have a good weekend. Andrew, thank you so much. Also, Steve and Shamila. And everybody, I hope and pray you have a great weekend.
Chuck Bentley of Crown Financial Ministries believes you hold the key to powerful and lasting change. You can be a hero.
Are you happy with what you're seeing in our culture? Are you really pleased with the direction of this country? If you're not, then do your duty. Give. Make an investment. Put your money where your heart's desire is to make a difference.
You don't need a colorful cape and costume to be a hero. All you need is to get off the bench and into the game, and to support the fight for faith, family, and freedom. Join the team. Join Truth Team 360 with Point of View Radio. We need heroes to step up this week, today, and do what you can. Visit pointofview.net/team and choose your level of support. Be an important part of Point of View's 45-year legacy of changed lives and changed communities.
It will be a gift that pays off for eternity.
Pointofview.net/team, or give by calling 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're